This is downtown Toronto, and this is the starting point for today's journey. Today I'm riding the Canadian, the transcontinental train journey that spans across Canada from Toronto all the way into downtown Vancouver with stops in Kamloops, Jasper National Park, Edmonton, Saskatoon, and the place that I was born, Winnipeg, Manitoba. My name is Travis. This is the journey, and it starts right now. So it's Sunday morning, and this is the historic Toronto Union Station, well over 100 years old. Now, the Canadian departs every Sunday and Wednesday at 9:45 a.m. sharp. But after a quick check-in, a walk up the escalator to the platform, we're boarding, and we're ready to go for today's journey. So the Canadian departs Union Station, and right away you're hit with visuals of the CN Tower in downtown Toronto. But as quickly as they come, as quickly as they leave, because within about 10 minutes, we are completely out of Toronto, and the landscape begins to look a lot like this. And it's going to stay mostly like this until tomorrow evening when we arrive in Winnipeg. This is called the Canadian Shield. It's a lot of fields, lakes, and forests for miles upon miles. So about 3 hours in the journey, and we arrive in the Parry Sound across the Trestle Bridge, which from the exterior and the interior of the train provides an incredibly unique view. This is also, in my opinion, the last real bit of civilization we're going to see until Winnipeg tomorrow evening, because the next 30 hours are basically stops for small Hutterite colonies, fishing towns, and refueling stations. The train would end up rolling through the night, and I'd eventually fall asleep into the early morning hours of day 2 of the trip. But I think there's really something special and something magical about going to sleep and waking up as the world outside just passes you by outside of the train. So later that afternoon, we would roll into Sioux Lookout, the first place with self-service or even a convenience store since Parry Sound yesterday afternoon. This is where the landscape really starts to change quite a bit, from massive lakes and huge boathouses just outside of Kenora around Whiteshell Provincial Park, and shortly after to the prairies of Manitoba, where we are just rolling outside of Winnipeg. Crossed over the bridge into downtown Winnipeg, which is actually the same bridge that the original Canadian crossed when it first came into service in 1955. We arrived in Winnipeg Union Station, which also is well over 100 years old and actually designed by the same team of creators that created Central Station in New York City. Now, this train usually has about a 3-hour layover in Winnipeg. That's if the train runs on time. And one of the perks of Winnipeg is that it's one of the only stops along the way that's actually in the city. So you can grab a meal, do a little bit of sightseeing around downtown. Reason being is that in the early 1900s, Winnipeg was a transportation hub and called the gateway to the west because they built the city around the railway. So therefore, the railway runs directly through the city. Keep in mind that this 3-hour layover for a meal and for sightseeing is if the train is on time, which we'll talk a little bit about more later. So around 9:15, we reboarded the train, and 9:30, it was time to depart, and we were out of downtown Winnipeg. And much like with Toronto, within about 10 minutes, we're outside of the city, rolling across the prairies throughout the night. And this is where the train picks up a lot of speed, going about 60 kilometers an hour through all of Ontario and the lakes. But across the prairies, we maintain an easy 130 kilometers an hour all night long. I got up early the next morning, and I guess you could say that this is where I stand out from most of the VIA passengers, because I'm a coffee lover, I'm a coffee junkie. I love it so much, I even bring my own coffee making setup anywhere I travel. And to be honest, if you take one tip from this video, don't spend any of your money on the onboard coffee that VIA sells you for $2 or $3 a cup. It's kind of like dishwater, it's pretty gross. And also, when the hot water pours over my coffee beans, it's at that moment where I start to make a lot of friends inside the car. What can I say? I like to socialize, I love coffee. It's a win-win, it's the best of both worlds here. Although, we were a little bit delayed overnight, and we rolled into Melville, Saskatchewan around 6 a.m. home of the Melville Millionaires junior hockey team. But as far as cool things I can tell you about Melville, that's really about it. The next couple hours looked a lot like this until we arrived in Saskatoon around 12 noon for a quick refuel. By the way, if you are doing this trip east to west, Toronto to Vancouver, I highly recommend taking every opportunity to get out and walk around. The train makes maybe 2 to 3 major stops every day for fuel and supplies, and with no onboard Wi-Fi, real entertainment, or even cell service in most areas, it's really good to get out and socialize a bit, stretch the legs, get some fresh air. Day 3 of the journey looked a lot like this. We crossed into Alberta later that evening, make a quick stop in Wainwright, another small town along the way before we head to our final stop of the night in the capital of Alberta, Edmonton. Now, I know Alberta technically isn't the prairies anymore, and I know I'm biased, but prairie sunsets, there's just something really special and something magical about them, especially as the sun's rays hit the stainless steel exterior on the passenger cars. Like, this is what truly makes this journey so magical. So many varying landscapes, views, Canada's natural beauty, and whether you're in the car or outside train spotting, it truly is magical. So we arrived in Edmonton a little after sunset for the final major stop of the night. And this is what I mentioned earlier. Edmonton, like Saskatoon, are all stations that are outside of the city, so you don't really have access to, let's say, a restaurant or entertainment during the layover. Edmonton is also a spot where a lot of passengers hop on from the final destination to the Vancouver, so it gets pretty busy around this point. So around midnight, we reboard. The train would depart Edmonton, and we head into the night for tomorrow, which is easily my favorite part of the trip. So early day 4, we're approaching Jasper National Park. Again, this is my favorite part of the journey, and you're about to see why. But we were a few hours behind when we left Edmonton, but now we were ahead of schedule, which I would say is a bad thing, because when it comes to the Rockies, this is where you want to spend as much time as possible. And if you're going to get delayed, this is where you want to be stuck. But this morning we rolled past mountain after mountain after mountain all morning long. Nature, wildlife, like this is why you pay for the ticket. And this portion of the route is usually really cloudy and overcast, especially early on in the morning. So the fact that it was clear, it was fantastic. It really was a beautiful thing. So we pulled into Jasper around 8 a.m. on this beautiful morning. The first thing I did was I went to the Bear's Paw Bakery in Jasper. Cinnamon bun, a coffee, they're an absolute must-have, and they're really good. Keep in mind, I'm a coffee junkie. I love a good pastry. This is the place to go, and it's just outside the station. After that, made a quick little friend, and if there is one stop along the route that you gotta stop and check out, it's definitely Jasper. We reboarded, and we headed off around 9:30 a.m. There was one thing that I noticed was missing from this trip, specifically when we left Jasper, and it was this. The panorama car. So VIA usually rolls one of these panorama cars with all their Canadian departures, but for some reason, none of them have been in action since they refurbished the Canadian about 2 years ago. But I really do hope that they bring them back, because they're seriously sexy cars. And also, like, look at these views that you're seeing right now. This is an economy. This is just out the side of the window. You got to imagine a 360 glass dome in the panorama cars, how much better, how much awesome they would be. But I love the Canadian, I love the views, and I want it at its best. And speaking of which, instead of telling you about the visual experience, I'll let you take it in. This, again, is easily my favorite part of the trip.
There.
So it was early evening, and we're starting to approach Kamloops, in the heart of the Okanagan. Kamloops also is going to be our final major stop before we hit our final destination tomorrow morning in downtown Vancouver.
All aboard! Thanks, Kelly.
We left Kamloops North Station around 8 p.m., headed across the North Thompson Bridge, out of Kamloops, and the rest of the journey from here to Vancouver is a big contrast from the 130 kilometers an hour across the prairies. We maintain probably about 50 kilometers an hour all night long as we go through the twists and the turns of the Okanagan and into the night. Now, day 5 starts bright and early, 4:30 a.m. It's a crystal clear morning just outside of Vancouver, and as we cross the Fraser Valley Bridge into Surrey, BC, we're only about an hour outside of Pacific Central Station in downtown Vancouver, our final destination point. And Pacific Central Station is only a one-way station, shall we say. So basically we have to reverse to the station. So we stop, the engineers get out, they change the track, and we back into downtown Vancouver for the final moments of this journey, this great Canadian journey, I might add, across Canada on this beautiful Thursday morning.
What a beautiful morning.
There are a few things I want to touch on before we conclude. How's the food? Well, I was in economy, so this time VIA wasn't allowing anybody in economy access to the dining car, and economy would be, I guess, the third class of train seats. You basically order your food, they bring it to your seat. It's about 10 to 15 bucks a meal, pretty reasonably priced for breakfast and dinner. You only get 2 meals a day, by the way. I tried every option on the menu, and I can honestly say I don't think there was a bad one. The omelet, sausage and eggs, roast beef, they were all fantastic. And I'll tell you this, Chef Paul and Chef Greg do a fantastic job in the back. Keep in mind, they're cooking all this on a moving train in real time. What about delays? Well, so we were on time in Vancouver. Actually, we were borderline early, which is extremely rare for VIA. Keep in mind, though, we were 5 hours late at one point in the trip running into Edmonton, but I've seen the Canadian get as late as 8, 12, even 16 hours late behind schedule, which is kind of crazy, but a lot of it is freight delays because VIA does not own any of the tracks they run on. They strictly rent them from CN, and in the Kamloops area, they rent the track from CP, and freight always gets the priority. So it's constant stops, constant delays, which is why the train can get up to 16 and 12 hours late. Now, as far as prices go, right now an economy trip to Toronto to Vancouver will run you a little bit less than $500, which I'd say is pretty expensive considering in economy, nothing is included, no food, no bed. I mean, it's pretty bare bones, especially when at the peak in the last 2 years, you could get this whole trip start to finish for $170. No joke. That's what I paid in March of 2021 for this trip. Kind of crazy, and it was also why I was able to ride it so much. And that $500 is still cheaper than the pre-March of 2020 price, which I think was hovering around $600, $650 for a one-way trip, Toronto to Vancouver or vice versa. Always go east to west. The Toronto to Vancouver route, I think, is way better than Vancouver to Toronto. Just my preference. Now, what about a sleeper? Well, unless you want to spend $2,000 for a sleeper cabin or $3,000 for a two-person cabin, overall, is Via worth it in mid-2022? I'd probably say no. The prices have gone back up to almost full prices that they were in late 2019. The trains are consistently late, and it's almost like Via is trying to make this train only for the retired and for the wealthy. I mean, a 5-day journey, run you $500 to $2,000 each way, especially when even for the $500 that you pay, you sleep in your own seat in economy every night. There's no shower. Keep in mind, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5" tall. If you're in Europe, I'm 195 centimeters tall. Sleeping in that seat is not fun. Really is not. Doesn't matter how many pillows you have. Also, I want to give a huge thanks to all the countless rail fans and creators that helped me to make this video. Peden Rail Fan, Ethan the GTA Rail Fan, Mamabear, Tim Heyman, Nico Sander, Lucas the Kamloops Rail Fan. There's so many people that helped me make this video with the exterior shots of the train rolling by in real time. I couldn't have done it without them, and you can check out all their pages linked down in the video description below. And without them, I couldn't make this video the true train lover's dream that I wanted to. Thank you so much. Hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video, because I do a little bit of traveling and would love to share the next one with you. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Peace.